What's going on, guys? Hope you're all having a good one. I thought I would make a video giving you guys a few tips and tricks on how to make your drone footage look better and look more cinematic. So if you own a drone or if you've ever flown a drone, you're gonna know that the footage doesn't always turn out the way that you expect it to. And this is either due to filming in the wrong settings or just not doing enough in post, basically. So today I thought I'd give you a few tips and tricks. So tip number one, always shoot in 4K. Guys, the higher the resolution, the better your footage is gonna look. It's a no-brainer. Most of the drones these days shoot 4K, and if they don't shoot 4K, try and shoot in the highest resolution that you possibly can. This obviously is just gonna make your footage look a lot cleaner, and it's also gonna allow you to do a lot more when it comes to post, which we'll get into a little later on. Secondly, guys, I also like to keep my ISO really low when I'm shooting, like as low as possible. I'll tend to shoot at 100 ISO if I can, or if I'm shooting in low light, I'll maybe push it to 200 or 400, worst case scenario. But the lower you keep your ISO, guys, the less grainy your footage is gonna be, and it's gonna look really clean once you add all your color adjustments and effects in post. When choosing a color profile, I tend to stick to D-Log. This basically is like the cinema style color log for your drone, and what it's gonna do is it's gonna desaturate and sort of decontrast your footage when you're shooting, but then it's gonna keep all that information for you to then adjust later in post, which is really helpful when you're grading your footage. Okay, so this might be a little bit of a controversial one, but I tend to shoot all my footage in 24 frames a second. I know a lot of people are fans of shooting in 60 frames or 50 frames, but the only times that I shoot in those frame rates are if I'm shooting a shot where I know I'm gonna wanna slow it down or speed ramp it later. Otherwise, guys, I tend to stick to 24 frames a second because that frame rate is gonna give you the most natural looking footage and the most natural looking motion blur. If you're shooting all your footage in 50 or 60, the footage isn't gonna look as clean, and it's not gonna look as natural or cinematic when you're putting it in your timeline. Another downside of shooting 60 frames is you can't shoot 60 frames in 4K. You're gonna have to down res to 2.7K. So it's also gonna take an impact on the quality of your footage. Just another thing to keep in mind. All right, so those are just a few basic tips and basic settings that I tend to use when I'm shooting drone footage. So let's hop on over into Premiere Pro and I'll show you a few effects that I like to do to achieve that cinematic look. All right, so jumping into Premiere Pro, I've got 3 clips lined up here from the opening sequence of the video. And I'm gonna show you a few of the different techniques I like to use to get these clips looking nice and cinematic. So first thing you're gonna wanna do is head over to this panel here and add an adjustment layer. Okay, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna drag that on top of all the footage in our timeline. So anything that we put, any effects that we apply to this adjustment layer is gonna affect all the clips underneath it. So then what you're gonna wanna do is go to effects and search for crop and drag that down onto your adjustment layer. And what we're gonna be doing with the crop is we're gonna be changing the aspect ratio, or I guess changing the way that the aspect ratio looks. We're not actually changing the aspect ratio. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go 11% on top, 11% on the bottom, and you can see it immediately changes the footage to look more widescreen, more cinematic, and a little bit more like an anamorphic effect. This is probably my favorite little hack, I guess, to use on footage when I'm trying to shoot cinematics and I'm not using wide cinema lenses. This just really helps to sell that cinema style effect. All right, the next thing I like to do is play around with the speed duration of the clips. So if you have a clip that you wanna change the speed of or change the order in which it plays, right click on it, hit speed duration, and I think this one here, let me check. got this clip. Okay, yeah, so this clip here goes speed duration, and I'm gonna reverse the speed and I'm gonna speed it up to 200%. So this should now play in reverse and be twice as fast. Boom, there you go. Okay, so basically what that's gonna do is play the footage back in reverse and speed it up. So instead of going forward and over, this is more of a cinematic reveal, and we're flying backwards over the object without actually having to record backwards. The one thing that I will say is be careful that you don't apply this effect to footage where you have a moving subject. So for instance, if we did it to this one here, let's go reverse speed, you're gonna see here that our subject in the middle is stepping backwards, and we don't want that. So let's just undo that. Because then the effect is going to look a bit cheesy, because you're going to be able to see subjects moving backwards, and we don't want that. So I think that shot works perfect like that. Okay, awesome. One of the other things I do a lot when I'm editing drone footage is I play around with keyframing the scale and position. So let's take this clip here, for instance, I think is a good example. Put your cursor at the beginning of the clip, and then what you're going to want to do is keyframe in the position and scale. And for this particular shot here, I want to, let me just lock this layer. I want to have the subject be the focus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click and I'm going to scale in on the subject. Now this is where your 4K footage comes in really handy, because you're still going to maintain quality when you're cropping in. So let's make that keyframe there. And then if we scrub all the way to the end of the shot, let's scale that back to 100% and center it there. So now when we play it back, the clip should start focused in on the subject and then move away. So you can see by applying those keyframes, you're actually adding another dimension of movement to your shot as well. So it's almost like you're moving backwards and across from the subject, and it helps sort of highlight the subject and make him the focal point of the shot. This is also going to work on this other shot here, where we've got the drone sort of spiraling upwards, but I want the drone to spiral up and move up in a more drastic movement. I think it's spinning too fast and not moving high enough. So we can do the same thing with the scale here. Let's keyframe in the scale at the beginning. Let's say maybe around there. And then go to the end frame, add another keyframe, let's say 150%. And then if we play this back, it should look like it's spiraling up a lot faster. Whereas really we're just keyframing the scale and making the shot appear as if we're flying up higher than what we actually are. Okay, so taking a look at the footage before and the footage after that we've just created in that little edit, you can see how easy it is to make your footage stand out and look way more cinematic than it does when it comes straight out of the camera. So even if you think your footage isn't that great, there's always room to play with different effects and techniques that's really going to improve the quality of your footage when it comes down to your edit. Okay, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you found that useful and you can apply some of those tips in your own videos. If you did find this video useful, make sure you smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time.